Hi. For any of you who've watched the videos before, you'll notice the fact that Lou isn't with me today. She's not with me today for a couple of reasons. One is that we've both been suffering from a quite horrible germ. So if I cough a lot in the middle of this, please bear with me. The other reason is because that some time ago I said I would do a series on my recovery, and this is part of that series. So I was going to, the intention was that I was going to do this alone anyway. This one is about, why did I drink? So, why did I drink? That's a very good question, and it's not an easy one to answer. So, if I tend to sort of tell stories and ramble a wee bit, please bear with me. But I try to get the flavour of why I drank. I think the thing that really summed it up for me was one time when I went to an AA meeting. And I'd been at a few AA meetings and I just really didn't identify with the people there at all. They seemed completely different from me, and I just didn't feel part of this. I shouldn't have been in Alcoholics Anonymous. I should be somewhere else. That's what I felt. And then somebody at the top table is the person who's the speaker, turned around and said something which has stuck with me from that day until this. And what he said was that when he discovered alcohol, he found the bit that God had left out. For me, that made total sense. It was the first time I'd ever heard it put that way. But for me, it was, that just really summed it up. Remember Dean Martin saying that he felt that he was born 2 drinks behind the rest of the world. And to some extent, so was I. Because when I drank, I didn't drink to get drunk. I drank because it made me feel real. When I wasn't drinking, when I was sober, I really didn't feel real. I didn't feel visible. I didn't feel as if anybody even noticed me. But when I drank, I felt something else. The first time I ever remember having a drink was when I was about 8 years of age. And I was sitting with my father. My father wanted to watch the boxing. He was a great boxing fan, and there was a big fight on, and he wanted to watch it. And I, as his 8-year-old son, was being a bit of a pest, I suppose. I wanted to be with my dad, us guys together. And he must have recognised that, because what he did was he went and he got a glass and he poured a tiny little bit of his beer into it, and then he filled the rest of it up with lemonade. So basically I got an extremely weak shandy. But it wasn't the taste of the beer, it wasn't the fact that, it wasn't the effect of the beer. What was fantastic was I was with my dad. And I remember just feeling I belonged. I felt accepted. I felt that I was in the right place. I have no idea who was fighting that day. I have no idea who won. I have no idea anything. But I remember that feeling. I remember that feeling of sitting there with my dad, feeling like 2 guys together. And I think that was part of what drinking was for me. I belonged. I belonged. It gave me a feeling of belonging. It gave me a feeling of being in the right place. I can't really remember when my first serious drink was. And I know an awful lot of people can say, well, I can tell you time and date and what it was and all that. I have absolutely no idea when it was. What I do know is that from a fairly early age, when I drank, I tended to drink to excess. I tended to want to drink more than the people who were round about me. I tended to want for the party to not end. I wasn't the one who suggested leaving the pub or the bar. I was the one who suggested that if we left the pub or the bar, that we take some booze with us. So alcohol for me just was something, it was like a lifeline almost. I don't think I had a great deal of trouble in my early days of drinking, but it did change my personality, and I do know that. It changed my personality from someone who was shy, retiring, didn't feel very confident, to somebody who was very confident. In fact, I could probably say I was actually a bit arrogant when I drank. There was an arrogance came out of me. So the shy, retiring boy went away, and this arrogant person came out in his place. I felt that I was God's gift to women. Most women disagreed with that, I have to say, and quite rightly so. I felt that I was the font of all knowledge, I felt that I was highly intelligent, which I was, but I thought I was far, far more intelligent than I was. I felt that I knew more than everybody else round about me. In fact, I remember one time being in a bar in Glasgow and arguing about politics, and to be honest, I really knew very little about politics. I tended to read what I think the Americans call the red tops, what we would call the sort of trash papers, and that was all I ever read about politics, because I wasn't really that interested. But I was arguing about politics in a bar in Glasgow, and the person I was arguing with most, who's a good bit older than I was, got up and went off to the toilet, and somebody turned round to me and they said, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "Nope." They said, "That's the professor of politics from Glasgow University." And rather than be embarrassed, my answer was, "Well, you think you'd know better," because that's how arrogant I was in drink. I look back at it now and I laugh, but I also look back on it and get extremely embarrassed, I think. Alcohol, I think there was a point where I crossed a line with alcohol. Now, I'm not quite sure when that point was, but I think it was after probably I got married. Up till that point, I used to drink with the guys, and we drank far too much, far too often, and every time we went drinking, it was party time. But I drank sociably. After I got married, my wife did not like the people that I ran about with. She didn't like the people I drank with, and in fact she really didn't want them around the house, and she made that abundantly clear. And my drinking changed then. I started going to bars by myself. I started to drink alone. And that took a new dimension. There was nobody in control anymore. There was nobody watching what I drank. I was more and more and more out of control. The other thing that was happening that hadn't really happened before was I was beginning to get withdrawal symptoms. When I woke up in the morning, I would shake. My hands would tremble quite very markedly. The sweat would start to lash out of me. I couldn't face anything, but the thing that was worse, of all, was the fear. I had this anxiety, that something was going to happen all the time. There was something just outside my peripheral vision that was really, really scary. And I needed another drink. I needed a drink to remove that shaking, to remove that sweating, to remove that fear. And without that drink, I just felt absolutely hopeless. So it kind of began this change in my drinking where, I would drink heavily and then I would drink the next day. And that would lead to drinking heavily again and then the next day. And so slowly but surely I'd become a binge drinker. So I didn't just drink the weekend. I might drink for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or one very notable time for 8 weeks where I wasn't sober for 8 weeks. I was absolutely out of it. Something else had changed there as well, is that, it became the most important thing in my life. And I'd beg, borrow and steal to get another drink. I was physically, mentally and emotionally dependent on alcohol. And I had no idea. I had no idea that that had changed. As far as I was concerned, I was just a sort of, hey, look at me, I'm the happy-go-lucky, I'm party man. But I wasn't anymore. I didn't party anymore. I drank alone, I drank in, corners of bars. Occasionally I'd become sociable, but I wasn't good company. I really was not good company. As far as my wife was concerned, she just could not get through to me at all. A lot of it, as far as I was concerned, was her fault. If she hadn't banned the guys from the house, if she wasn't so po-faced, if she wasn't so miserable, if she wouldn't only come and drink with me, if she would only, if. So it was always her fault. It was always her fault. I'd been to see my GP, my doctor, a few times, and my doctor suggested, that in his wisdom, that maybe I should go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was not the slightest bit interested in Alcoholics Anonymous. I wasn't an alcoholic. How could I be an alcoholic? Me, an alcoholic? Come on. And yet I worked in a psychiatric hospital at the time, and and I had the key to the drug cupboard, and I was stealing pills right, left and centre. I had pockets full of pills for when I couldn't drink. So when I had this huge anxiety, but I couldn't actually drink alcohol because I was working, then I would pop all these pills. So I was never straight. I was never without something inside me. Yeah, I would sober up every now and again, and I would last, the longest I would last would be about 2 months. I was beginning to recognise that maybe I had a problem. One or two people who were from Alcoholics Anonymous had come to see me and talked to me about their problem. And all I could think is, well, when I get as bad as you, then I'll go and do something about it. What I hadn't realised was that not only was I as bad as them, I was actually worse than most of them. I had passed that point a long, long time ago, and yet I couldn't recognise it. I couldn't recognise the fact that, I had gone beyond it, that my life was just a mess now, My wife was frantic, she was at her wit's end, and eventually she got up and she left. It left me to my own devices. It left me to the drinking patterns that I had got into, which was, go to bed drunk, waking up in the morning, get drunk again. Waking up in the morning, get drunk again, and continue and continue and continue. But I had nobody to blame any longer. I had no one to blame at all. Just me. Just me. I remember one absolutely terrifying incident when I had been called for jury duty. I had to go along to the court, and I can't remember how many of us there were, about 100 or so. And they choose a jury, and the judge sits there, and all the solicitors are around, the barristers, etc. And they call your name and, pick you for jury duty or not. And I was a mess. my sweat was lashing out of me, and I thought, I just can't do this. I cannot sit here. And it was a murder trial. There was a murder trial in in the Glasgow High Court, and fortunately, they didn't pick me. Fortunately, they didn't pick me. And I left the court that day, and I went straight to the boozer. I went straight to a pub and started drinking again. And I never went back. Now, they could have come and arrested me because, I was on official duty, and to this day, I have no idea what happened. I remember waking up in the morning, night, I don't know when it was, because time had just gone and I'd lost track of time, and I could hear radios and dogs, and and it sounded like the police were outside the door, and I don't know if that was an actual true incident or not. All I know is that I sort of wrapped the blankets around me and sort of hid in a corner, so they never came in, if they were out there in the first place. I don't know if this is fantasy, whether it was, alcohol-fueled sort of hallucination. I have no idea. All I know is it was terrifying, and I handled terrifying by going and getting drunk. And for a long time, alcohol had been my friend. For a long time, alcohol had given me things that nothing else could. I loved alcohol, and I hated alcohol, because slowly but surely I was beginning to look in the mirror and not like what I saw looking back at me. I didn't like the person I was becoming, or had become. I'd become actually a long time ago. I didn't like the John that was the drinker. I didn't like him when he was sober, and I really didn't like him when he was drunk. The funny thing was, I hated drunks. I'm still not very keen on drunks today, and I hated me as a drunk. I didn't like being drunk. I didn't like being out of control. I liked that power that came from alcohol, where I just felt good, where I felt as if I could do anything. But the problem was, if I could do anything at the moment, then in another couple of drinks I could really do anything. And then in another couple of drinks, and I would, obviously I ended up absolutely legless, absolutely drunk as a monkey. And I hated being that way. I hated that being out of control. But I hated the person that was in there. I hated the person who just was so selfish. I hated the person who hurt everybody. I hated all of that. So there was a self-loathing in there, and part of the way for me to deal with the self-loathing was to get drunk. But that was a vicious circle, because I hated the person, I had this self-loathing about me. I drank to get rid of it, which made me a horrible person, which brought back the self-loathing, which made me want to drink, which made me, and it went round and round and round. And eventually, something happened. The alcohol just stopped working. It no longer took away the fear. It no longer made me feel powerful. It no longer made me feel anything. It actually fueled the fear. It fueled the panic attacks. I found myself, running out of pubs because of terror. And I just no longer wanted to live like this. And then I went to work one day, and I straight off a bender, and I went into the DTs. I was in the middle of a psychiatric ward. I was in charge of the psychiatric ward, and I was in the DTs. And I had the keys to the drug cupboard, and I thought, well, you know, I'm all right, I can self-medicate myself. And somebody came in and they saw me, and they just thought, whoa, we need to do something about this. And they escorted me off the ward, and I remember they took me to the boss's office, and the boss asked me if he could phone somebody, if he could get somebody to come and get me, because I was in a terrible mess. Sweat was lashing out at me, I was shaking like a leaf. I was hallucinating, and he just said, you know, we need to get somebody to come and get you. And I just sat there and saying, you know, I'm just a hopeless case. And my boss turned around to me that day, and I'll never forget the words that he said, because it was rather profound and rather beautiful. And it gave me huge amounts of hope. And what he said to me that day was, you know, you may be a hopeless case, but you're not a lost cause. And that really stuck in my head. It really, really stuck in my head. Here was a guy, despite all the evidence, actually had some belief in me. And that belief sort of kindled a little spark. And that spark sort of grew, and it grew, and it grew. And that was 32 years ago. And I haven't touched a drop since. And in the rest of this series, I'll start talking about how I got sober and the changes that happened. But that was my drinking. It's obviously a potted version of my drinking. But having thought I'd found like the elixir of life, the thing that made my life meaningful, I had to realise that it was the thing that poisoned me. It was the thing that destroyed my life almost. But what I had to find was that I had a second chance. And that second chance, and puzzled up as part of that second chance. Well, that was my drinking. And in some further videos, I will talk about my recovery. Thank you. Bye.